Let's take a short break with a homegrown uplifting track. This is Be Who You Wanna Be from Newcastle band Never Say Never Music.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. This is for the hustle.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. Come on, use that muscle.
Check out Be Who You Wanna Be and more from Never Say Never Music on your favourite streaming platform or visit neversaynevermusic.com.
Bring it back.
Ever meet those people in your world who just give of themselves? They are just so magnetic to be around, those people who are just constantly giving and giving and giving of themselves. But there's a cost that comes with that. We're going to hear a bit of that journey today, the opportunities that come by going for it and giving of yourself and having a go, and the cost that it has of constantly doing that. Julie Goodwin was the first ever winner of Australia's MasterChef. She's the author of this new book, Your Time Starts Now. She's going to be open and very clear with us around some of her mental health challenges, the family situations, the pressures of what it means to be the first winner of MasterChef as well. Looking forward to sharing this conversation with Julie with you. Just before we do, a reminder, please like, rate, review, share this podcast as much as you can. It's always free, and we just love getting these stories out to help other people head towards better understandings in their world of various parts of life. All right, let's get stuck into this conversation with Julie Goodwin. Julie Goodwin joins us. G'day, Julie.
G'day, Clayton.
It's so good to have a conversation with you, and something that I think you have always been very well known for, especially since you sort of hit the spotlight around Australia and it came into so many homes, was just your honesty and realness. And certainly you've made sure that happens in this book as well. What was the experience like of writing a book about your life rather than necessarily about sort of food or something like that?
Oh, gosh. It's quite different to writing a cookbook. It was brutal, actually. I found it very hard to do because I had to, I had to take myself back to some pretty difficult times and relive some memories that I, made it a bit difficult. But and I also had to have some fairly heavy conversations, with certainly with my parents and other people about, to let them know what was going to be written about in the book, because I very much of the mind that if you're going to write it, you might as well write it properly.
Yeah. And it is always something that to balance out. There's many books that people write their story and they're only going to put the good things in, but it doesn't sort of tell the true story. None of us are perfect. So there's, you've certainly had to dig into those parts, and it shows your vulnerability in quite remarkable ways. We might touch on some of those. Can we go back to the start of, I suppose, your the loves and the passions that you have in life? There's a few different aspects of that. Obviously, there's a food passion and creating it, but there's also certainly as I went through your book and understood, there's sort of a passion to help people, to care for people that's come through as well. Are they fair passions that you would say sort of were part of your life early on?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that sort of charity side of things definitely came from the fact that we were the recipients of that when I was little, and that stayed with me, and that's really been a beautiful part of my life. It's how I met my husband, was through St Vincent de Paul Youth Group when we were teenagers, and I don't know. I think the way I describe it is that I just feel called to it the way some people are called to, do other things, to music or to painting or to, polo or whatever. That's just something that I have felt called to and do feel called back to always.
Yeah. I know earlier in life too, like there was even that sort of went down to working in even juvenile detention centres, things like that. Can you talk us through a bit of that experience and how that maybe shaped you in different parts of your life?
Yeah, sure. So my beginnings really out of school or out of uni were in youth work, and I started off doing retreats and workshops with Monica Brown. She's a children's singer-songwriter she's still doing rounds. She's an amazing woman, and I was her backing vocalist, and we went from there to going, into high schools and running their school retreats and so forth. And when I settled down, I didn't want to travel anymore because that was fully travelling. And so I got a job as a youth worker at Tarryong Detention Centre, which is up at Mount Penang up here on the Central Coast. But I was in the little max secure unit down the bottom. So there was, it only housed sort of a few dozen boys, but they were considered to be the worst of the offenders in New South Wales. I was the only female. I was only young. I was only 24 when I worked there. And, that was a really hardcore environment. And it really, it was a real eye-opener for me. I'd had quite a protected upbringing. So that was a real eye-opener. And it has stayed with me, Clayton. I've actually gone back into the juvenile detention centres now with the cooking program. Just because, as I said, I just keep feeling called back to that kind of work. So I've been able to combine the food stuff with the youth work stuff and sort of bring it around full circle, really.
Yeah. The idea of food, the MasterChef, it's one of these ones where, you were the first person to win MasterChef. There's always going to be this sort of tag around you around what this is. I sort of think Guy Sebastian, Australian Idol, these sorts of areas. But you're so much more than just that moment. But it's also a moment that has provided so much opportunity for you. How, as you go back, and certainly, as I read the book, you seem incredibly grateful for that opportunity, although there was some tough stuff through going through that as well. How do you reflect on even having the opportunity to be a part of MasterChef, and then what came from that as well?
Oh, look, I'll never be one of those people who sort of says, that sort of bites the hand that feeds me. That opportunity has brought so much into our lives, and yeah, oh gosh, it was hard to go through, and there have been downsides, but not big downsides compared with the upsides, and the things that it's allowed me to do, and the voice that it's allowed me to have in all other sort of areas as well. It's there is a lot more to what I do than cooking, but that cooking has truly been the platform, and it because it's such a love of mine, I've been so grateful for it. I've been so grateful for it. My family, my life. I actually, it has informed pretty much my whole adult life since 2009. I don't really know what I'd be doing if I hadn't gone on MasterChef and headed off in that direction.
I'm guessing that as you sort of first said, I'll enter into this competition, that you weren't thinking, well, this could define my life going forward and my work from that. So when was the moment that you realised, this is actually a change? Was it sort of, the publicity around it was enormous and intense at the time. Was that the moment, or was it sort of years later you went, actually, this is now sort of reshaping where I'm heading?
No, it wasn't years later. I knew before I even left the house. It was because we were very protected inside that house. We didn't know a lot of what was going on outside, but sometimes the paper would make it in, and it was like there were so many stories about it. And then one day they took us out for a bit of a photo shoot for one of the magazines, and they got us all dolled up. I think it was the first time I'd ever had my makeup professionally done in my life. I didn't even have that done on my wedding day. And they did my hair and got me all dressed up and took photos of all the ones that were still left in the house at that stage. And I remember walking out onto the street, and this road crew was working, like these big burly guys in their high-vis vests and their hard hats and that, and I just hear, Joy! I turned around, there's all these big blokes going, yeah, go Joy! And I was like, what is happening? I'm a 38-year-old mother of three walking down the street getting catcalled by a road crew. In that moment, I thought, I've entered a different reality here. There's something very strange going on. And I did have an inkling that perhaps life may be slightly different on the other side of this thing.
Yeah, and certainly that's the case. The opportunities that you've had and you reflect on have been huge in that regards too. One of the things that you're very open about in your book, and you have been open about in conversations in the past as well, has been especially as you sort of went through that process, and you talk a lot about the details of going through that, the stresses of being away from family and not being able to connect in that way, but also sort of in the aftermath of winning that there was sort of I don't know if unraveling's the right word, but there was sort of a mental health aspect of trying to juggle perhaps who you were outside and inside and what expectations were and things like that. Would you say that it was sort of those points that started you down a journey of, hey, look, I've got to work on what my mental health is, or was there other parts that contributed to that?
Oh, look, I think in all the unpicking of what went horribly wrong a few years ago is that, that when you've got unresolved stuff from your childhood trauma, that can really start to inform a lot of the things that you do as you grow up and as an adult. And so that really shaped a lot of my sort of behaviours in terms of being a perfectionist and being a people pleaser and never wanting to say no to anyone or never wanting to let anyone down. And I really took that to the nth degree. I don't do much by halves, unfortunately. And so in that sort of flurry of not wanting to let anyone down, and always there's so many requests, when you in the public eye a little bit, there's always, charities that need help, there's people that need help, there's work that needs to be done, there are jobs that you commit to, there are family things that you commit to, and those things just all started stacking on top of each other. And really and truly, when I look back at my calendar from the years immediately following MasterChef, there's no single person could do all the things that were in my calendar. And I think if I was looking at it with clear eyes, I would know that I would be heading for a fall at some point. And I really think the only surprise is that I held on for so damn long before it all fell apart.
And this is it was not that long ago, that many years ago, that you sort of said, well, actually, I'm going to even commit myself to getting some professional help in certain ways and in different health units and things like that. The decision to share that when it still is relatively fresh, Julie, was that, you talked about at the start of our conversation, well, you got to be open and vulnerable about what it is. But there's also aspects where you go, well, maybe that's still a bit too close and too fresh for me to share that. Did you ever consider not sharing some of those things?
Look, it was a sort of a multi-pronged decision. The first time I spoke about being hospitalised, I was still in hospital. And part of that came from fear. Part of it came from obligation, because I had simply not returned to my radio program or to my cooking school. So I felt like I owed an explanation to the people who were starting to say, where is she? Why has she vanished? What's going on? What's wrong? And the other part was fear, because while I was in that psych ward the first time round, and I was hospitalised 5 times, but the first time round I was given leave to go out to the local pool and swim, which has become very much a part of my therapy ongoing. And two times running, the Uber driver recognised me, and 2 days running commented as they dropped me back to the psych ward about, what's she doing here? What are you doing here? And so I thought, well, this is coming out. This is one of the small downsides of a public life, is that nothing is private anymore. And I thought, well, I either let some Uber driver tell some passenger who tells some, the Daily Mail, or I just tell my own story my own way. Yeah. And so that was the decision I made then. And then after MasterChef in 2022, I did comment on my mental health struggles, and the outpouring of love and relief from people who didn't know how to talk about it prompted me to think, well, this is still not being talked about enough. There's still too many people feeling shame about the fact that they're struggling. And so that's where I decided, look, let's just let it all hang out and see what happens.
We're going to talk a little bit more around that. I do know, Julie, that, when I first had the first conversations around depression and mental health, especially in men about 15 years ago or so on the program, it was almost like, well, actually, this is never talked about. Thankfully, it's talked about more, but we still don't have enough of an understanding. So We're going to be back with Julie Goodwin, the author of the book Your Time. It starts now in a couple of minutes' time. I'm going to delve a little bit more into that and part of her healing process, part of the opportunities to even speak about it now, and so much more of her life and what she still hopes to achieve as she has that impact in our world. That's on the way next here on Towards Understanding.
Share your brand, your event, your message. Across 90 Christian radio stations and major cities in Australia and New Zealand. By sponsoring Towards Understanding, hosted by Clayton Bielan. More than 210,000 people tune into Towards Understanding each week. And with just one sponsorship, you'll reach this immense engaged audience. Find out more about this exciting and unique opportunity now on the sponsorship page at positivemedia.com.au.
Julie, we were talking about the fact that you were public about your mental health struggles, and certainly it's been an opportunity, it seems like, for you to be able to speak into these places. I'm fascinated for you as well, and if you'd be willing to share around, what does healing look like for you? I know sort of the idea in the book that you talked about, well, it's sort of it goes round in circles at times, it's these sorts of things. What does that look like for you, and how do you perhaps have both protections in place that maybe you didn't have when you first hit the headlines around the country, but also opportunities to be taken to help others in that space? I'd imagine that's a balancing act as well.
Oh, look, yeah, it is. And like I say, getting well from that kind of sickness is not a straight line. You know, you don't go from A to B. It's not like setting a broken leg and away you go and you can run again like you used to. It's circular, it's wavy, it's up and down, and it's something that I now know that I'm going to have to keep my finger on the pulse of for the rest of my life. And it does involve actions that I have to take on a daily basis to keep well. And but I've committed to doing that because I don't ever want to put my family through what they went through, and I don't ever want to put myself through what I went through. So the one of the most important things for me has been therapy. So I've seen a psychologist. She's helped me to really understand where all these sort of behaviours came from that led me down this path to unwellness. And in understanding, you know, we can start to adjust those behaviours. And also, you know, I gave up my radio career. I gave up my cooking school, and I sort of have started to build my life back up, you know, brick by brick from the ground, you know. Of course, my family are still all around me, and I'm still very, very lucky to have, you know, my beautiful husband by my side always, and my boys and my granddaughter. But the actions that I need to take include I take medication on antidepressants. I meditate every night, and a lot of mornings as well, just a few minutes of complete peace and mindfulness and presence. I exercise. That's very, very regular. That's really important to my well-being. I've got a sleep habit, but, you know, I've got a ritual at night that helps me get off to sleep, and I'm committed to getting enough sleep every night. I manage my calendar a lot better than I used to, so it's all color-coded with, you know, family, creativity, exercise, work, charitable things. And if any one colour is starting to overtake, or if, you know, the family colour isn't appearing enough in there, or creativity isn't appearing enough in there, I can see it when I open up my calendar. And then also just awareness of the symptoms and the signs of decline, of mental health decline, is really important to know. And I do pay attention now when I start to see those signs, and I make the adjustments I need to make in what I've got on that week.
Love that. What some great tip for anybody, I think, around that calendar, you know, around how you put your priorities in. There's some remarkable things. Thank you for your honesty in sharing that. I think that's going to help encourage and inspire so many who may be going through something similar as well. So thank you so much, Julie.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned was your family as well, and certainly your husband Mick sort of seems to be a real anchor in your life. Certainly, as you read the book, and you know, if you imagine a movie, it feels like this character that suddenly appears just when everything's needed to just help the hero to get through that next space, and that's sort of how I kept seeing that moment. It feels like that's certainly been a place for you to be able to have that strength and to go to whatever the ups and downs might be.
Oh, look, You're exactly right. But it's not that he appears whenever I need him.
No,
He
no,
just,
no. Just in the book,
he never
yes.
disappears.
Yes,
He
yes.
never disappears. He is. I'm so lucky. I'm so blessed to just have this person in my life who is such a constant and who I know has my back. He's what he wants is for me to be happy, and what I want is for him to be happy. And so we look after each other, and to have that person in my corner, you know, even in the worst times where I felt like I couldn't share what I was going through, he was there. And he helped me get the help that I needed. I didn't check myself into hospital. I was taken there by somebody who could see that I was in absolute crisis and needed that help. And we're just side by side through everything.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
I'm so grateful. He's been by my side since I was a teenager, and we've just celebrated 30 years married, and 35 years together. So we're very lucky.
As well, as I said, and yes, certainly, of course, there the whole time. It's just, it really does feel like a bit of a superhero character in incredible ways. It's wonderful.
Very quiet, unassuming superhero.
One of the questions I want to ask too is around, and often I've asked this over the years of people who have been, especially in the public eye, and then willing to admit some deep struggles that have occurred as you have, which is around how have the family understood that. There's sort of an expectation, I'd imagine, that the kids, that family would understand that, all right, well, we couldn't control the headlines that happened during MasterChef. That was a choice that was made. But there was a choice that you could have made to not share, and I know you've indicated why you did. But how are family around you sharing those very public and vulnerable areas?
Well, I had a lot of conversations with them. Some of those conversations were just immensely difficult, and I had everybody's blessing. Even my parents, who I was so blown away by them, because they're of an age where you don't air your dirty laundry, and it's you just keep yourself to yourself, sort of thing. And so for me to say to them, I need to talk about this stuff. If I'm going to talk about this, I need to be able to talk about all of it. And they were amazing. They just said, you do what you need to do. And then my sons, when I got the copies of the book prior to it being released, and I had told them the whole way through, and every time I went to write about them, I asked their permission to write about, certain different things, and I received their permission, without a second's hesitation. So we sat down at the dinner table, and I handed them all a copy each of the book. And I said, there's a couple of things I haven't told you yet that I'm going to tell you now before it comes out in public, because I don't want someone to come up and say something to you, at work or at the shops, and have it be a shock to you. And so I told them about a couple of the darker things that they didn't know, and they listened to me, and they, these boys, they said, we love you, Mum, and whatever happens, we're always, but, we've got your back. And they started flipping through the book and looking at the photos, and it's like, one of them just goes, oh, look at this picture, Dad's got a mullet. It's like, and we all just start laughing, and that is my family. That's my family. They've swung with every single thing that's happened. They have taken it all in their stride, and we are so solid. I am so blessed.
Yeah. I want to explore a little bit around your relationship with what cooking is too. I'd imagine that there's as we've talked about, that this is what meant suddenly everybody around Australia knows who you are. There's a stress, I'd imagine, that comes with that pressure of now everyone's expecting you to do something cooking. There's a joy, I'd imagine, because that's part of what it is as well. And, you've had many different TV shows and cookbooks and various things you're a part of. As you've gone through this, over the last sort of 15, 20 years in the spotlight in this regard, what is your relationship with what cooking is, and what's its purpose, I suppose, in your life now?
Oh, look, I've loved food for as long as I can remember. I've loved cooking really came into that as a young adult when I got my own house kind of thing and started playing around there. But now, and I've been through the whole range. So when I was unwell, I lost joy for everything, including cooking. I had nothing left. But it's come back to me, and it really cements everything for me. It's a language. It's how I tell people I'm thinking of them. It's how I reach out and say, I'm really sorry that you're sick or that you're grieving. But here, you don't have to worry about what to make for dinner tonight because it's sorted, So it's still my language and very much a vehicle for how, I want to work, do community work and stuff. It's at the heart of everything we do, It's at the heart of our celebrations. It's at the heart of everything we do, and we all need it. So for me to be able to bring people together over food is, I just think it's one of, it brings me purpose, It gives me a hook to hang my hat on. I believe in community. I think that isolation is one of the greatest problems facing us as a society, as a world right now, and I think that food is the vehicle that can bring people together.
Yeah. Julie, as I sort of read your book, reflect on your story, one of the things that it seems to be part of the way you operate is you're sort of willing to give most things a crack. Like, all right, yeah, I'll have a go at that. And I'm thinking about even the timing of things like I'm a celebrity, get me out of here. And you're like, yeah, all right, I'll have a go at this. My sense is that there's a remarkable strength in that, but also maybe there's some weaknesses that come with. Actually, maybe I shouldn't. It's part of you said. I'm now having to put some things in place in my calendar to make sure I don't just go, yeah, all right, I'll have a crack at everything. But can you talk to us a bit about that? And I suppose I am thinking about that experience in I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, and that's a big step from where you were as well. Talk to us a bit about those experiences and I suppose that the attitude of who you are in that regards.
Look, I think that when we found out, because we didn't find out on MasterChef until after I was sort of down to about the top 37 or 40 in the country, we didn't find out until then that I would have to live out of home to compete in this competition. And so there was a truly an honest moment there where I nearly pulled the pin because, it just didn't seem possible. But we didn't. We said, let's just give it a crack. And the words that Mick used to me on the phone when I broke it to him that I would have to live out of home to do this thing were, let's not die wondering. And I've kind of applied that to other areas of my life. Yeah. So when I was asked to do I'm a Celebrity, it hadn't been on Australian TV. So they said, look up some clips from the franchise in other countries. And I was sitting on the couch with Mick. We're looking at these clips of people doing this insane stuff with, spiders and snakes and eating weird stuff. And I just laughed. I said to him, oh, this is ridiculous. I'd never do this. And he just went, yes, you would. And I went, oh, really? Okay, then. And off I did. And I did it again a couple of years ago on Dancing with the Stars, But I said to them, I can't dance. I said, I'll work hard and I'll be your comic relief. But understand that I am an uncoordinated person and I cannot dance. And they said, oh, you'll be fine. And so I did. And I just think, it resonates in my head, let's not die wondering. Yeah. And honestly, saying yes to things that you're uncomfortable with occasionally can bring about some pretty amazing adventures.
One of the, we sort of mentioned it at the start of our introduction, Julie, but underneath the byline on the book, Your Time Starts Now, it's food and fame, sort of get that, failure and freedom. And we've talked a bit around some of the struggles and the vulnerability you've had. I'm really fascinated by the word freedom. What do you mean, as you put that on your book, that your definition of what freedom means for you?
Oh, look, I think part of this freedom that's in that title there comes with age, but it also comes with the work that I've done with this therapist, is that I now have freedom from some of the expectations that I used to place on myself. One of the most powerful things that I have learned through the past 5 years has been that everything's a choice, that some of those choices are hard. So closing my cooking school, I made that choice. I didn't have to, but if I didn't, the consequences were going to be a lot worse than if I did. Some choices are hard, but everything's a choice. So, if I'm looking at my calendar and there's too much in there, I've got choices of what to take out, and there may be consequences. Maybe I will lose money, or maybe I will let somebody down. But if I make a choice to not let them down and to do that job and to, then what am I choosing that over? And if I'm choosing it over my mental health, or if I'm choosing it over my granddaughter, or if I'm choosing it over, the higher things, the more important things, then is that the right choice? So the freedom for me comes in understanding that everything's a choice and that I can choose to live a full and happy life, and that I'm allowed to do that. That's freedom to me.
That's great. Julie, final one for me, and thank you again for your openness both in the book but also in our conversations. We've really appreciated it. And that is really this sense of if, somehow you were, a producer on that day one of MasterChef all those years ago, and you were able to just sort of whisper into the ear of just a tiny bit slightly younger Julie and say, hey, this is some advice I'd give you just as you're about to head into this journey that you're not quite sure of, but I'm going to tell you a bit of advice. What would you think you say to her?
Hold on to your britches, girl. It's about to get wild.
Oh, fair enough too. Julie, it's been wonderful to have a conversation. Thank you for the encouragement you've given, for the honesty you've provided to so many around mental health, around your journey, around just, living a life and choosing some great choices around how best to be, and that openness and honesty as well. We wish you all the best with this book. Your time starts now, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Clayton. Lovely to talk to you.
Julie Goodwin, my guest on Towards Understanding.
Let's take a short break with a homegrown uplifting track. This is Be Who You Wanna Be from Newcastle band Never Say Never Music.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. This is for the hustle.
Be who you wanna be.
This is for the struggle. Come on, use that muscle.
Check out Be Who You Wanna Be and more from Never Say Never Music on your favourite streaming platform, or visit neversaynevermusic.com.
Bring it back.